Today we're just going to wrap up some kind of pending items that are out there in the form of, some of the more alternative or crazy loan structures that are out there, as well as some sundry items. Now, what are some examples of some of these alternative loan structures? Well, there are payday loans and title loans and pawn shops. Perhaps the mafia is lending you money. First, with payday loans, they're pretty bad. Payday loans are pretty terrible. There are some very few situations where they can make sense. Not a lot. For example, let's say you need to fix a car to get to work, and this is what you have to do. You've tried everything else. You need to fix your car, or you're gonna lose your job. Maybe in a situation like that, but honestly, I ran 14 miles a day to and from work when my car broke down and I didn't own a bike, because that was the situation that I was in. Granted, I'm pretty physically fit to do that, thankfully, but you need to go to pretty extreme lengths before you consider going down the payday loan route. Now, payday loan can be better than the income you would lose otherwise, and so you could say, go to your job, get that money, and then instantly pay off that payday loan. Could be fine. If you are getting a payday loan, that means your personal R value, if you remember that from a couple sections ago in this class, is that your personal R value would have to be crazy high in order for a payday loan to make sense, which means you should be willing to go to pretty extreme lengths to avoid them. If you ever what's called roll a payday loan over, this is a really, really bad situation where it's basically you're taking out a payday loan to pay a payday loan, and it just compounds and gets worse and worse and worse and worse. That is kind of the nightmare scenario. If you are considering and kind of on the fence on this, just Google and YouTube John Oliver's AE or the payday loan video. One, it's pretty funny. Some questionable language as always with John Oliver, but AE is literally anything else. So good times. Title loans and pawn shops. These are kind of like payday loans, but they're secured loans with collateral. And so for a title loan, you'd give me the title of your car instead. So if you don't pay your loan, then I get your car. Pawn shops are kind of like a title loan, but you hand over valuables like guns or jewelry instead of the title of your car. And the same lessons that apply to payday loans apply to these areas as well. Yes, very high R values. Anything else if possible. That leaves us with the mafia. Now, not literally the mafia, but there are all sorts of shady characters out there that are trying to offer you loans. They get pretty creative. There are kind of these short-term mortgage loans, which is a pretty weird category of loan. They're also kind of like payday loans, but they're online. So there's these online personal loans. They generally include these shady loans tend to include pretty complicated paperwork, and it's we'll get you your money. Now, all the lessons from payday loans apply to what I call the mafia category as well. But talk to anyone who knows what they're doing before moving forward in this area. Now, a quick crash course on bankruptcy. As far as bankruptcy is concerned, if this is something that's on your radar, you need to do a lot of work. I've included some articles and some links that will give you just a brief overview to give you an idea. But if you're ever considering this, you need to do your homework. So as far as how bankruptcy works, well, first of all, it beats our old system, or society's older systems, which generally involved slavery or debtor's prison. Thankfully, that is not the system anymore. And we have these different chapters of bankruptcy. So we call it different chapters because they're actually different chapters in the bankruptcy code. And the main ones that you need to be aware of is Chapter 7 and 13. And Chapter 7 bankruptcy is just a straight bankruptcy where you're done. And Chapter 13 is kind of a reorganization that takes a few years. So for Chapter 7, you're going to lose basically all of your possessions that have value, and all your debt goes away. In Chapter 13, you kind of lose control of your income, and your income is garnished and it's going to certain places, and you have kind of have a debt payment plan that's put in place. And then after a few years, then your debt goes away after that point. Now you should know your credit score gets basically trashed for years on your credit report, generally around 10 years for Chapter 7 and 7 for others. But at least it can be a clean slate as far as your debts go. And certain things you get to keep through bankruptcy, like a 401k, and depending on the state that you live in, sometimes a certain value of your home you get to maintain. As far as one of the negative things you get to keep, generally student loans stick right with you. So as far as post-2005, there were some changes in the bankruptcy code so that you couldn't just declare Chapter 7 bankruptcy over and over and over and over. It's very hard to declare bankruptcy more than once, at least in a semi-brief period of time. But it's not like nobody is declaring bankruptcy. I mean, it's about 1.5 million people every single year. But again, if you find yourself in this situation, just talk to a lawyer. And you're going to think, I can't afford a lawyer, I'm about to go bankrupt. Just talk to a lawyer. You really, really need to talk to a lawyer. It is very easy to mess up bankruptcy. You need to know how this is going to operate before you consider going through this. So yes, talk to a lawyer, please. We're finishing up on the different debt repayment methods that we can employ. Now, the primary debt repayment methods are known as the avalanche approach versus the snowball approach. Now, the snowball is where you pay the smallest debt first, and then you pay the larger ones. Now, why would you do this? First of all, it's very motivating. Don't discount the psychological factors. You get to see an entire debt go away. Also, on the downside, you pay more interest and you get completely out of debt, actually somewhat slower if you choose the snowball effect. But outside of the psychological part, it does maximize your near-term cash flow. This is kind of a complex point. So let's say you completely pay off one of your debts. Well, then what is your minimum payment that you have to make? Well, your minimum payment has just fallen because you have fewer debts. So in the near term, your cash flow, your potential cash flow that you need in, say, like a worst case scenario, it actually improves. The avalanche method is where you pay your highest interest loans first. And so you pay lower interest charges over the course of, paying off your debt. You also get completely out of debt faster, but it's kind of the opposite of this near-term cash flow scenario. You're going to be holding on to this debt likely for longer. So what should you do? You should do kind of what helps you and motivates you the most. So be self-aware. And to reemphasize this point of motivation and psychology, this has been found to be hugely important, sometimes even more important than the hard numbers. But the motivation psychology make up a large part of whether somebody actually ends up successfully paying down debt or not. And lots of the kind of the personal finance gurus, sources out there, like the Dave Ramsey, the Mr. Money Mustaches of the world, they focus a lot on the psychological motivations to keep you going until you are debt-free, because it is that important. So just don't underestimate the psychological aspects. Be self-aware. To help you with this exercise of self-awareness, I've created this exercise that I call Let's Be Evil. And it's a role play where you get to be the embodiment of all things evil. And so you have your dreams and your goals as you, and your job as this role play is to be evil and to derail your goals. And to do this relatively quickly, and to do this in 10 minutes, and think of all of your kind of your weaknesses and things that you might, some questionable decision you'd make, say under pressure or with lack of sleep or in some sort of situation like that. And create a very realistic, slippery slope to crush all of your hopes and dreams. You have those goals, and in 1 year, over a course of a year, we are going to derail all of those goals. You are going to come up with that series of decisions. So make all those bad decisions, but make it realistic. Think through those weaknesses and scenarios where you could potentially make a suboptimal choice. So take 10 minutes, go through this exercise of self-awareness, and it is well worth the time and investment.